All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Carney Nasser, and I'm an animal protection attorney with expertise in big cats. Just for a little bit of background, I am the attorney who pitched the wildlife trafficking case against notorious Tiger King Joe Exotic. And that investigation resulted in the wildlife crime charges, for which he's serving several of his 22-year prison sentence. And more recently, I worked for 4 years on a documentary that exposes the exotic animal ambassador trade, meaning it blows the lid off of the celebrity conservationists we've all seen on TV, who we thought were doing good work, but it turns out they're actually involved in the exotic pet trade. So we're going to see some of those people. We're going to get into some of those examples, but this is really specific to athletes. We're going to talk about how athletes are not only complicit in some really problematic behaviors with some of our most endangered big cats when they go visit roadside zoos, when they go have these photo ops or take selfies with big cats, that they're actually also violating the hazardous activities provisions in their player contracts. So I have a little bit of background. I started law school to pursue a sports law avenue and actually worked for the Oakland Raiders for a little bit of time. So this is sort of a conversation that marries both of my passions and fields of expertise. So I'm excited to chat with you about this. And we're going to get into some of the legal implications, the ethical implications, the relevant law, and where we go from here and how we fix the problem. So I'm going to start with some examples. Right here, you'll see San Francisco Giants pitcher Trevor Gott with a lion named Kane at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom Amusement Park in Vallejo, California. This picture was taken in 2019. Six Flags is not an accredited zoological park. And this cat is over the age at which it's legal to offer big cats for public contact. So under the Federal Animal Welfare Act, it's legal for exhibitors like Six Flags, like Joe Exotic even, to offer big cats for public contact between approximately 8 to 12 weeks of age. Well, knowing the date that this cat was born and the date that this interaction happened, it was well past 12 weeks. So this right here is a violation of federal law. And it's also highly problematic. I mean, we have a pitcher who's paid for his talent throwing a ball, and he's got his hand on the back of an apex predator. Here we have Odell Beckham Jr., who plays for the Browns, and he's playing with a tiger at Doc Antle's Roadside Zoo in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. You may have heard, if you follow some of these issues, if you've been keeping up with this big cat crisis that we have here in the United States at all in the last year, as so many have been, you'll know that Doc Antle was recently indicted for animal cruelty and wildlife trafficking. And that indictment happened in October 2020. This picture happened in 2019 when Odell Beckham Jr. went to visit that roadside zoo. Here we have an earlier example from 2016. This is NHL San Jose Sharks, Brett Burns, with an adult cheetah. And during this interaction, he actually was bitten by the cheetah. This is a Columbus Zoo interaction, and the Columbus Zoo notably actually just had another attack on its property involving one of its own employees and a cheetah. Here is another example at Myrtle Beach Safari in South Carolina. This is an adult tiger, up close and personal with Indomitian Zoo in a swimming pool. And this is, I mean, the level of hazardous activity that this involves cannot be underscored enough. This is a violation of the Federal Animal Welfare Act. It's a violation, I believe, of the player contract hazardous activities. claws. And this is a situation that put the player at a great level of risk. This is another Major League Baseball player, Tony Rizzo, holding a snow leopard. Snow leopards are critically endangered, but they're bred puppy mill style at a facility in Kansas that passes them along to the Columbus Zoo. They've sent cats to magicians. They've sent them to other roadside zoos for photo ops. So this is something, unfortunately, that we see a lot of, even with our most endangered animals. They're just being used as like photo op props. This is September 2015, and this was an experience that was actually procured by the club manager. This is not a happy cat, I'm sure you can tell. So here's just another perspective so you can see the body language of the snow leopard during this interaction. Snow leopards are very elusive. I went on a conservation trip to Nepal a couple of years ago, and many experts have never even seen a snow leopard in all their years of visiting in Nepal to their habitats. So this is just not, there's nothing about this situation that's appropriate. It's inappropriate for the players, it's inappropriate for the cats. There's no conservation value to offering an experience like this. There's no educational value because you're not actually getting to see this cat's natural behaviors. You're only getting to see this cat's stressed out, anxiety-ridden behaviors. So let's see, okay. And the Columbus Zoo has been a bit of an outlier. Many zoos have taken a stand against, many of the accredited zoos, that is, have taken a stand against these types of encounters. But the Columbus Zoo has been fiercely defensive of its use of animals for photo ops over the years. And it immediately after our movie world premiered last month, within days, the Columbus Zoo announced a 180 degrees about face change in internal policy, which is definitely a step in the right direction. And this is a picture of NVA's Jeremy Grant playing with tigers and other exotic animals at the Myrtle Beach Safari, again, Doc Antle's facility. And just, for anybody who saw the train wreck that was Tiger King, that I call it reality show, every single roadside zoo owner featured in that show, but for one, Mario Tabrow down in Florida, have either been indicted, put out of business, subjected to hundreds of thousands of dollars of federal fines, or are in prison. So this is, Doc Antle, Joe Exotic, they're just examples of what happens at roadside zoos. They're not outliers. Every roadside zoo that offers this type of experience is involved in the big cat trade. Right, oops, let's go here, okay. There's another example. You'll see Doc Antle's facility pop up again. This is an adult cat with Marquise Goodwin and his wife. And in this, he's doing a PSA for the roadside zoo. I don't fault these players for not understanding that these facilities are actually involved in the exotic pet trade, not in legitimate conservation. So I don't fault them. I don't stand in judgment of them. In fact, my very favorite athlete in the world, Lewis Hamilton, who's a Formula One driver, very, very knowledgeable about environmental and animal protection issues, has even been duped into going to a roadside zoo to play with exotic cats. So I don't fault them. I think that there's a lot of people have been made the victims of the roadside zoos that have been perpetuating this fraudulent message that they're involved in conservation, when the reality is they're just breeding cats for public contact, then dumping them in other roadside zoos or into the exotic pet trade when they become too big and no longer legal to use for public handling. So I use this example. This is an old picture of Shaq and Joe Exotic. I know he's no longer playing anymore, but it's problematic for these players to set the example to kids who look up to them, to show them playing with tigers, playing with chimpanzees, playing with other rare and exotic animals. It sends the message that these animals are here for our whims. It sends the message that they're not really as endangered as we thought they were if they're just available down the street to take to use for your Instagram profile photo or your dating site profile photo. So this is part and parcel of the problem, because a lot of people who we have talked to over the years about why they actually bought a tiger or why they got fill in the blank exotic animal, is because they saw it on TV. They saw somebody they like and respect playing with an exotic animal. So it's a kind of monkey see, monkey do behavior. And the professional athletes, in this case, Shaq being one of them, have not set the best example, and have sent a false message that these animals somehow might make appropriate pets, which they never do. You cannot tame an apex predator. Okay, so let's talk about how hazardous it is. I mean, we're talking about the players' hazardous activities clause in their contracts. How hazardous actually is it to play with a big cat? Well, there are frequent attacks. We're talking about large, complex apex predators. You cannot tame out that instinct that these animals have, the wild instinct. There are always wild animals, even if they are hand raised in captivity. And this is just a sample of a few incidents in which there have been serious attacks, or sometimes fatal, just in the last couple of years. To pull the full list would have taken, pages and pages and pages. But it's available online, a lot of the reported incidents. We're talking about people who've been fatally mauled, people who have had arms ripped off, been bitten from the accredited zoos to roadside menageries to people's pets. I'm sure you've been following the news to see that just in the past 3 months, there have been 3 tigers who have been seized from suburban Texas neighborhoods. So, and on top of the hazards that are presented from the safety aspect of playing with an apex predator, and even juvenile and very young cats can do a lot of damage. Even on top of the risk for danger, there's a risk for public health problems too that can be seriously problematic within the context of a locker room or a bench. We're talking about zoonotic illnesses, COVID being one of them, which we know is transmissible between humans and big cats. I myself was involved in a big cat rescue, a cub who'd been found chained in somebody's backyard in Baton Rouge. And even without having direct hands-on contact with that tiger cub, I still got ringworm on my face from that cat. Now, that's something that's really can spread like wildfire, clearly, because I didn't have direct contact with the cat, but I still got the ringworm that she had been affected by all over her body. So just a couple of examples of this is not just a risk from a public safety issue. It's a risk to public health as well, because also many of these roadside zoos and facilities that procure these experiences are not maintaining the highest of standards on anything. So they're frequently cited, roadside zoos are frequently cited for being extremely unsanitary and forcing animals to be kept in conditions that are horrible, which then create a risk for transmitting diseases and other things to people who come in contact with them as well. All right, so let's get into the hazardous activities contract clauses. Just a few examples here. I've pulled some from a few of the major sports leagues. So the NFL has the most robust of the hazardous activities contract clauses in Appendix A of the standard NFL player contract. The other activities section says that without prior consent of their club, a player will not, it's a mandatory provision. A player will not engage in any activity other than football, which may involve a significant risk of personal injury. So that's mandatory. And, many of the other leagues simply ask the players, like, please don't do dangerous things. The NFL players give the league and the teams the right to actually enjoin them from participating in this type of activity. Major League Baseball is a little more watered down. The player agrees that he won't engage in boxing or wrestling or other sport involving a substantial risk of personal injury. So, if you're going to go by the, if you're going to be a strict constructionist with the baseball contract, it just simply pertains to other sports. So there would be an argument that, other dangerous activities aren't covered and that they would have, free will unless it's specifically written into the contract for that particular player. Even in Major League Soccer here, I know I didn't have a soccer example in the photos, but Major League Soccer has addressed this, similar to the NFL's contract provision, that the player will not engage in sports or activities which constitute a substantial danger to his health or safety. The NHL has a provision that says that the club will have the right, in addition to any other rights, to enjoin him by appropriate injunctive proceedings for any breach of any other provision of the player contract, which includes provisions about the ability to govern the conduct of the player off the ice. So it's a little bit more broad. And that, so it's, there may be some wiggle room there for the players, or perceived wiggle room there for the players, but the NFL and Major League Soccer are pretty clear on this. The NBA, the player agrees that he will not, without written consent of the team, engage in any activity that a reasonable person would recognize as involving or exposing the participant to a substantial risk of bodily injury. It then goes on to list a whole slew of examples from motorcycles, boxing, fireworks, hoverboards, and this is likely not something that was contemplated, that people would actually seek out opportunities to get their hands on an apex predator, but it's happening. And my personal opinion is it should be interpreted under this provision of the player contracts. All right, so that's on the athlete side. That's the athlete obligations. Now, what's the law on the side of the roadside zoos that are offering these experiences? Well, under the Federal Animal Welfare Act, which governs the exhibition of big cats and other animals in catch-all regulations that are enforced by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which has been criticized by its own internal auditors for failing to do its job. It usually inspects about once a year, frequently doesn't issue citations, frequently doesn't seek any type of meaningful enforcement action against violators. But what they do say is that there's an inherent danger present for the viewing public and the exhibited animals when there's any chance the public could come into direct contact with juvenile or adult big cats, and that big cats become juveniles when they reach 12 weeks of age. On the flip side, we've also seen a movement towards interpreting anything below 8 weeks of age as a violation of the Animal Welfare Act as well, because those animals can't thermoregulate, they're still immunocompromised, they haven't had all their vaccinations yet, and they're just too young. They should be sleeping in a dark area, a quiet area. Many roadside zoos exploit both ends of the 8 to 12 week limit by malnourishing big cats, feeding them inappropriate diets, so they stay smaller longer, and they can be passed off as younger than the age that they really are. And when and if these animals are lucky enough to end up in a reputable and accredited sanctuary where they will never be used for public contact again, they frequently have metabolic bone disease and a lot of other critical health problems that require long-term specialized veterinary care and monitoring. So the USDA has been horrible at enforcing the rules here. As you can see, Doc Antle has made a whole business model off of offering big cats of all ages for public contact opportunities. So, you know, theoretically, this should be prohibited. But the USDA only inspects approximately once a year. That leaves 364 days out of the year when nobody's looking. There's only a patchwork of state regulations. There's no uniformity of law about this. We don't even have sufficient regulations under the Endangered Species Act to monitor how many big cats there actually are in the United States and where they're being moved from and to. So this is an industry that lacks transparency. It lacks any sort of legal mechanism at the current point to track the coming and going of these animals, which makes this a very desirable and lucrative business for roadside zoos to get into. These attractions can be offered for up to, you know, from $50 to thousands of dollars per interaction. We found that some of these animals are subjected to up to 60 encounters per day. And so you can do the quick math and see how lucrative of a business it is for these exhibitors to offer these photo ops and special, you know, tiger cub baby bottle feeding time and things like that.
Carney, please excuse me for interrupting. I don't know if you can see the chat because of the tech issues, but I was just reminding you we have about 5 minutes left in the session.
Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no problem. So there are only 2 states right now that prohibit public contact with big cats, Kansas and New York. Nevada just passed a ban on public contact. It's pending signature by the governor right now. And right now, we have new federal court precedent that interprets the Endangered Species Act to protect cats who are neonatal from being prematurely ripped away from their mothers. So this is what happens. These cats are ripped away from their mothers at birth. They're habituated to human contact. They're forced into all these public contact interactions, and then they're dumped in the exotic pet trade at the end. I saw Joe Exotic dump a liger in the exotic pet trade for $6,800. So that's just one example. So, you know, it costs $10,000 a year just to feed a tiger. This is why these animals are just, it's like a revolving door. I call it breed and dump. Once they're too big and they're too much of a financial and safety liability, they disappear. All right. I just actually went through this slide. We have a piece of federal legislation that is pending called the Big Cat Public Safety Act, which would put an end to all of these nefarious practices. It would make it illegal for any exhibitor, any zoo, accredited or unaccredited, to offer these cats for public contact. And it would also ban the private ownership of big cats as pets. So it would dry up both the supply and the dumping ground for the animals on the other end. And that's a critical piece to protect animals and to really protect public health and safety as well. So the Big Cat Public Safety Act is pending now. That will be a critical solution to this problem that's placing people and cats at risk and is detrimental to long-term survival of the species. So that's what I got for you. I'm happy to, I've got my contact information here for people who want to reach out with questions or want to discuss further. But sorry for running long.
Thank you very much, Carney. If you'd like to turn your slides off, then hopefully you can see everyone else again.
Yes, absolutely. Let's see. Oh, stop. Share. There we go.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay.
And you've got lots of questions already in the chat box. Can you see them?
Okay. Oh, wow. Yes, I do. All right. Have any leagues or clubs penalized players for this? No, they have not. In fact, when I was director of the animal welfare clinic at Michigan State, we wrote to the NFL and we wrote to Major League Baseball, and we never heard back from either of those leagues. So that's, it's something that now I think we're going to have a better opportunity now that the movie has come out, is about to, it will be available on streaming soon, and it's going to create a lot more discussion about this very issue. I know that the zoos are not going to be able to do this anymore, so they've been the source of those encounters. So animal protection and advocacy necessarily involves multifaceted strategy, and so we weren't able to have the success that we were hoping for on the side of the sports leagues, but we're having it on the other end. Let's see. Tiger Temple in Thailand. I think that tigers are the most iconic of the big cat species. I was doing some research for a paper that I wrote, and I found that there are 1,500 schools and professional sports teams. Like if you add up every single sports team from schools to the pro leagues in the United States, there are like 1,500 that have selected the tiger as their mascot. They're the most recognizable. It's just kids have an affinity for tigers. They're really cool looking. And I think that that's just a piece of it, is they're just like extremely alluring animals. Tiger Temple, thankfully, was exposed. Sharon Gwyneth from Nat Geo and her husband, Steve Winter, the award-winning writer, photographer team, did incredible work in exposing that. But we need to understand, like at the baseline, like there are no reputable facilities that will ever allow you to touch a tiger, period, full stop. So that's the education that needs to happen. And that's what I tell people. I'm like, how do I know a roadside zoo from a real sanctuary? A real sanctuary, first of all, isn't open to the public every day, typically. And they'll never use an animal for a profit-driven activity. They'll never give you the opportunity to handle any, and they're not breeding. Let's see.
We probably should wrap there. I'm sorry to say.
Absolutely.
We're at 5:45. Like so many sessions, it's like we could just go on and on about this. This is kind of mind-numbing. I'm surprised that agents don't jump in, by the way. An agent has the incentive to tell their athletes not to do this as well.
I'm surprised too, particularly in the cases involving the adult cats. That's deeply concerning.
But thank you very much, Carney. Very, very fascinating and upsetting, but fascinating.
And actually, if I could just jump in for 1 sec here. Tigers can contract COVID, and many tigers and big cats in the US have developed COVID.
They have.
And that is such an important point to pass along as well.
Absolutely.
To these athletes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. We'll go ahead and close the session.
Thank you, Carney.
Thank you so much.